Awesome. I really appreciate the loud and proud voice reading the learning and habit targets. All right. So now, before we really get started with our lesson, I want to once again review our screen setup guide. So throughout this lesson, there are only 3 types of things that I should see on your camera at any given time. For the majority of the lesson, we should be having our camera up, which is where we're all at right now. So that looks like face and shoulders in frame at all times. So we're going to be seeing that for the majority of the lesson, anytime I'm talking, in breakout rooms, or for our Nearpod activities. The second screen setup that we might see is the camera down, which is the second photo. So that simply means that you're going to angle your computer down slightly so that you can see your desk. That way I can be certain that you are in fact working in your workbook and can maybe get a general idea of what you're struggling on. And the final screen setup, I may ask you to show work. If I say, all right, everyone, show work, that simply means that you will be holding up your workbook to the camera so that we can all see our work. And remember, we love mistakes in this class, so there should never be a reason for any of us to ever feel embarrassed to show our work. Okay? Once again, norms and expectations. Throughout this lesson, whenever I'm writing, if I pull up my doc cam, when I write, you write. We also need to ensure for class to run effectively that all screen setups are appropriate based on the activity, that we show our work on screen when called to, and there is no opt-out in this class. Everyone types in the chat, everyone participates, full stop, because we love mistakes, we respect the process, and we grow together. At this time, you're going to have 1.5 minutes to write your lesson vocab on page 4 of your workbook. So there's an activity on that page called Decomposing Parallelograms. I want you to use the space on that page to record this key vocab that we have listed here. This vocab is going to be essential for us throughout the lesson. So you can see that we have area. Would someone please mind raising their hand to volunteer to read the definition of area for us as the others write? Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so the amount of space inside of a 2D object. You can see the picture referencing area there. That inside space of the rectangle is the area. Quadrilateral is any shape with 4 sides. We'll be working with a lot of quadrilaterals this week. Parallel sides are 2 opposite sides that are across from each other that never touch. So you can see in the image with the arrows that is saying that if those lines were to actually continue on for forever, they would never touch each other. Perpendicular are 2 lines that meet at a 90-degree angle. And if you need to know what a 90-degree angle is, there's a picture of that below for a right angle. So a right angle is a 90-degree angle. That is represented by that little square that you see in the corner of those 2 lines. It says 90 degrees. So if you are working with a shape and you ever see that little square in the corner of 2 lines, that is indicating to you that that is a right angle or a 90-degree angle. So now we're going to engage in our 3 reads protocol. Takes 10 seconds to read this silent and solo now. Perfect. So we are going to read this problem together 3 times. And each time we're going to be asking ourselves a different question. And throughout this whole process, I want you to take notes on each question for each read within your workbook. Okay? And so the reason why we engage in the 3 reads protocol, can anyone remind me? We talked about this a little bit with lesson 0 last week. Mikhail? Perfect. So read 1. What is the problem about? So right now we are not focusing on even math really necessarily. We're not looking for numbers or anything like that. We are simply asking, like, what is happening in this problem? Are we talking about pizzas? Who are we talking about? What are we talking about? Just really general information. So go ahead right now I want you to read this problem, and then I want you to type your thoughts in the chat. So we're going to have 30 seconds to do that now. So your silent reading and note-taking in the chat starts now. Go. I can tell that Danae is reading. I can see that Kamari has already began typing in the chat. Perfect. Okay. So at this point, if you haven't started typing your ideas in the chat, you should be doing so within the next 10 seconds. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so a lot of you are getting to the same idea. They're talking about kite fights. So what is a kite fight? Has anyone ever heard of that before? Raise your hand in frame if you've ever heard of a kite fight before. No one? I know I haven't either. So a kite fight is actually a practice in a lot of Southeast Asian cultures where they literally put sharp edges on their kites and they like fight their kites. Like two people will fly kites and the goal is to try and cut the other person's kite down. So it's a really interesting game. I've never obviously seen it in person, but it actually sounds pretty cool. So right now, our read one information should be written down in our workbook, and we should have that concept. Let's write it here on this line, right above the box for your work. We're going to have that there. So write down that this problem is about boys making kites for a kite fight. All right. So now, read the problem again, silent and solo. Take 20 seconds. This time, what are you trying to find out? What is the question? 20 seconds to reread, and once you are finished, type your answer or your response in the chat. What are we trying to find out? What's the question? Go. Awesome. I'm seeing a lot of people are actually using quotations, and it looks like the quote is coming from the last sentence of the paragraph. Does Alex's kite use more paper than Kenji's kite? Absolutely. Very good. So, does it use more paper? What does that even mean? Like, what are we talking about? Does anyone have an idea of what we're talking about if we're talking about using more paper? Yeah, area, right? That was something that we talked about earlier during our vocab activity and our fluency practice. Absolutely, area. How did you know that? Can someone raise their hand and volunteer to come off mute? How did you know that we were talking about area? Yeah, exactly, right? During our vocab, when we talked about area, we saw that there was a square with this grid layout. Absolutely. And we can see that here for Kenji and Alec. Both of their kites are shown on this grid. Awesome. All right, now for read 3, what information is important? So this is the protocol that we're always going to use for read 3, okay? So whenever we try to identify what information is important within a math problem, we are going to annotate the problem. You always annotate the problem in mathematics, right? So on the screen, you can see it says, as mathematicians, we take an in-depth look at every problem that we solve. So off to the right, you can see cubes. Okay, the cubes is a really nice way to kind of always remember the process that you take when solving a word problem in math. So see, you are going to circle the key numbers. You are going to underline the question. You are going to box the math words. So that would be words. The image here shows that, words that could represent the operation, whether it were addition, subtraction, words like area, so on and so forth. And then evaluate and solve. So evaluate and solve aren't necessarily the process of the annotation. That kind of comes after the annotating. So we'll look at that more in a second. So at this time, using your draw tool, the highlight and pencil tools on Nearpod, I want you to annotate this text. If you get lost, remember there's a box on the screen that indicates how specifically you should annotate the text.